Keanu Reeves never expected his dog to be a hero, but when danger strikes, Max proves he's much more than just a companion. Keanu Reeves and his loyal dog, Max, were out for their usual evening walk through the quiet neighborhood of Jardim das Flores. The full moon hung high in the sky, casting a soft light on the streets, and the air was cool and crisp. But despite the peaceful surroundings, there was an unsettling tension in the air. Recently, rumors of muggings in the area had made the once calm streets feel a little too quiet. Max, a large and strong police dog, trotted beside Keanu, his ears perked up and his eyes scanning the surroundings. Normally, Max was a calm and steady dog, enjoying these walks with his owner. But tonight was different. As they passed the rows of neat houses, Max's behavior began to change. His usual relaxed pace slowed, and he started sniffing the air, his body tense. Keanu noticed the shift in Max's demeanor. The dog was alert, his ears flicking at every sound. Keanu instinctively looked around, sensing something wasn't quite right. The street seemed empty, but the silence was almost too quiet. He could feel his own heart rate pick up as Max's growls grew louder and more intense. Max stopped walking and turned his head toward a darkened alleyway ahead. His eyes were locked onto something in the distance. Keanu paused, looking down at his dog. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, but Max didn't answer. The dog's body was stiff with focus, and his low growl echoed through the quiet street. Keanu took a deep breath, but he knew they weren't alone. Something was out there. And Max had already sensed it. Keanu's eyes flicked down to Max, who was no longer trotting alongside him in his usual calm manner. The dog had stopped in his tracks, his body tense, ears pricked up, and his eyes focused on something ahead. Keanu could feel a chill creeping up his spine. Max had always been a loyal companion, but tonight, something was different. The dog let out a low, deep growl that sent a ripple of unease through Keanu. "What's wrong, Max?" Keanu whispered, his voice barely audible, as if speaking too loudly might disturb whatever Max had sensed. The growl grew louder, more serious, and Keanu knew something wasn't right. Max was alert in a way Keanu had never seen before. The usually friendly and easygoing dog was now standing still, his eyes narrowed, watching the darkness around them with intense focus. Keanu's hand instinctively moved toward Max's collar, his fingers brushing the cool metal as he tried to calm the dog. But Max wasn't having it. The dog was unmovable, his gaze fixed on something Keanu couldn't see. The street was quiet, with only the sound of distant cars and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. But Max's behavior told Keanu that the quiet wasn't the same as safety. The dog was sensing something, someone, that wasn't meant to be there. Suddenly, Keanu heard it, the faintest sound of footsteps echoing in the distance. They were slow, deliberate steps, like someone was trying to move quietly, but wasn't succeeding. Keanu's heart rate quickened. He instinctively turned his head, scanning the street behind them, but there was nothing in sight. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows along the quiet road, but Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Max's growl deepened, more urgent now. He turned his head slightly, his body tense, his tail rigid. Keanu followed the dog's gaze toward a darkened alley that ran off the street, barely visible in the dim light. The sound of the footsteps grew louder, and Keanu knew they were getting closer. Max wasn't just sensing something, he was warning Keanu of danger. Keanu stepped forward, but Max didn't move. The dog's stance remained defensive, and his growl grew even more menacing, as though telling whoever was out there to stay away. Keanu felt his pulse quicken as the footsteps grew louder. Whoever was out there wasn't hiding anymore. They were getting closer, and Keanu could feel their presence. He scanned the alley again, but there was still no one visible. Max's eyes never wavered from the alley, and his growl echoed in the stillness of the night. Keanu's hand tightened around Max's collar, but he wasn't sure if he was trying to calm the dog or hold himself steady. "Let's go home, Max," he whispered, his voice low but firm, trying to reassure both himself and the dog. But Max didn't budge. He stayed in front of Keanu, watching the alley with unwavering focus. Keanu's breath caught in his throat as the sound of footsteps grew even louder, now accompanied by a low murmuring voice, almost too faint to hear. Max's growl cut through the air again, sharp and demanding. They weren't alone. Something was out there, and Max knew it before Keanu did. Keanu's heart raced as the sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. He could feel the tension in the air as Max remained stiff, his eyes locked on the shadows ahead. Then, out of the darkness, 3 men appeared, walking slowly down the street. They were dressed in baggy clothes, their faces partially hidden by hoods. At first, they didn't notice Keanu or Max, but as they got closer, their eyes shifted toward them. The robbers stopped in their tracks, clearly surprised to see someone out at this hour. The leader of the group, a tall man with a rough face, smirked when he saw Max standing at attention. He looked over at Keanu, sizing him up quickly. "Good evening, ma'am," the leader said in a mocking tone, addressing Keanu as if she were alone. "It's a bit late to be wandering around here, don't you think?" He eyed her cautiously but seemed more interested in Max, who was standing firm and unmoving. Keanu didn't respond at first. His eyes were fixed on the 3 men, trying to assess the situation. He could sense that they weren't just out for a casual walk, they were up to something. Max, as if reading his thoughts, took one slow step forward, placing himself directly between Keanu and the robbers. His body was tense, and his eyes never left the leader of the group. Keanu's breath caught in his throat. The robbers didn't seem intimidated by Max at all. They were too focused on what they thought was an easy target. The leader looked at Max with a smirk, his eyes scanning the dog's body as if trying to figure out if he was really a threat. "What's this?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Is this your guard dog? A little fierce, isn't he?" He took a step closer to Max, his hand raised slightly as if to pat the dog. Max didn't budge. Instead, he growled lowly, a deep, warning sound that seemed to vibrate through the air. But the robbers just laughed. The leader gave a dismissive wave of his hand and turned to his companions. "What's he going to do, bite us?" he mocked. The 2 other robbers chuckled along with him, clearly underestimating Max. They weren't taking the dog seriously. They saw a big, intimidating animal, but they didn't realize Max wasn't just any dog, he was trained. Max's past was far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. Keanu stayed still, trying to remain calm. He knew Max would protect him, but he didn't want things to get out of hand. He was trying to keep the situation under control. But Max wasn't backing down. He stood in front of Keanu, unwavering and ready for whatever came next. The robbers took another step forward, testing Max's limits. "He's just a dog," the leader scoffed. "Let's see if he's all bark and no bite." But Max wasn't just barking. He was ready, watching every movement, waiting for a chance to strike if needed. He had been trained for moments like this. Max's growl grew louder, turning into a sharp, commandingly bark that echoed down the quiet street. The robbers stopped in their tracks, clearly taken aback by the power in the sound. They looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. Max wasn't just warning them, he was telling them to back off, and his stance made it clear that he wasn't afraid. The leader of the group frowned. "What's the matter with him?" he muttered, looking at Max with growing doubt. "Is he actually trained?" Keanu didn't move, but his eyes never left the robbers. He could see the hesitation in their eyes. Max had made his point, this was no ordinary dog. Max wasn't just a pet, he was a protector, and the robbers could see that now. But still, the leader didn't back down. "Think you can scare us off with a bark?" the leader sneered, taking a step forward. Max's body stiffened, and his muscles coiled like a spring. His eyes never left the leader's face. He wasn't growling anymore, his focus was sharp, watching for any sign of danger. Keanu's hand tightened around Max's collar, but he knew better than to hold the dog back now. Max had been trained to protect, and that's exactly what he was doing. Without warning, the leader lunged forward, but Max was faster. He moved with surprising speed, positioning himself between Keanu and the robber. With one swift motion, Max barked loudly again, forcing the leader to stop in his tracks. The other two robbers hesitated, clearly unsure of what to do. Max stood tall, his gaze fixed on the leader, daring him to make another move. The tension in the air was thick, but Keanu stayed still, trusting Max to handle the situation. After a few long moments, the robbers realized they were up against more than they could handle. The leader, finally seeing the situation wasn't in his favor, gave a reluctant nod to his companions. "We're out of here," one of the robbers muttered. With that, they turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness, leaving Keanu and Max standing alone on the street. Max's protective instincts had proven to be enough to send them running, and Keanu couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for his dog's loyalty and bravery. After the robbers ran off into the night, the street was quiet again. Keanu stood still, watching as Max, who had once again proven his bravery, relaxed slightly but remained alert. Max's eyes were still scanning the street, and Keanu could see how the dog was still on guard, making sure no danger was nearby. As Keanu began to process what had just happened, the sound of footsteps approached. First came a few neighbors, drawn by the loud barking and shouting. They looked around, trying to figure out what had happened. Some of them seemed nervous, but others quickly relaxed when they saw Max. Just then, the police arrived. The sirens broke the silence of the street, and two officers stepped out of the car. One was older, with gray hair and a serious look on his face. The other was younger, and both of them quickly moved to assess the situation. Keanu felt a sense of relief that help had arrived, but also curiosity about what they would make of the situation. The older officer took a few steps forward, scanning the scene. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" he asked Keanu, his voice calm but firm. Keanu nodded, still catching her breath. "Yes, everything's fine now. My dog, Max, took care of it." The younger officer, who had been standing quietly, suddenly froze when he noticed Max. His eyes widened with recognition. He pointed at the dog. "Wait a minute," he said, taking a step back. "Is that him?" The older officer looked confused for a moment but then narrowed his eyes as he took a closer look at Max. His expression quickly turned to one of shock and awe. "It can't be," he murmured. The younger officer stepped closer to Max, his voice filled with disbelief. "That's Maximus. That's the legendary police dog." Keanu's eyes widened as she looked between the officers and her dog. She had no idea what they were talking about. The older officer crouched down, reaching out a hand to gently pet Max's head. The dog remained still, watching him closely. "Maximus," the officer said, his voice filled with nostalgia. "I worked with him for years. He was one of the best police dogs we ever had. He saved lives, helped catch criminals, and worked in dangerous situations without hesitation." Keanu felt a wave of surprise wash over her. She had known that Max was special, but she never imagined that he had such a heroic past. She looked at the officer, her voice filled with curiosity. "You mean, he was a police dog? He really worked in the K-9 unit?" The officer nodded, his face serious. "Yes. Maximus was an elite member of our team. He was trained to protect, track down criminals, and respond to dangerous situations. He was one of the most skilled dogs we had. But after a tough assignment, he was retired. We thought he was lost or abandoned, but now I see he found his way to you." Keanu looked down at Max, who was sitting quietly beside her, still watching the officers but looking calm now. She realized that Max had always been more than just a pet. He had a hidden past that she had never known about. A past filled with bravery, danger, and loyalty. Max was trained to protect, no matter the circumstances, the officer continued. His instincts never fade. You've seen that tonight. This dog isn't just any pet, he's a true hero. Keanu's heart swelled with pride as she looked at Max, now understanding the depth of the bond they shared. Max wasn't just a dog who needed a home, he was a protector, and he had been doing his job all along. The next morning, the neighborhood of Jardim das Flores felt different. Word had spread quickly about what had happened the night before. Keanu walked outside with Max, still processing the events. As they stepped into the quiet street, neighbors were already gathering. People stopped to talk, and some even waved at Keanu, giving Max appreciative looks. The entire neighborhood seemed to feel safer, knowing that Max was around. Children ran up to Max, their faces full of admiration. "Is it true, Miss Anna?" one of the kids asked, his eyes wide. "Did Max really scare off 3 robbers all by himself?" Keanu smiled, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't expected. "Yes, he did," she said. "Max is very brave." Max, always calm and friendly with the kids, wagged his tail as they gently petted him. It was clear he had become a local hero. The people in the neighborhood had always been friendly, but now they were even more connected. They saw Max as not just a dog, but as a protector, someone who had saved Keanu and made everyone feel safer. Keanu watched as neighbors gathered around, talking about the event, asking how Max had known to act. They all seemed thankful and proud to have such a strong and capable dog in their community. Keanu couldn't help but reflect on everything Max had done for her. He had been with her through so much. He had been her companion when she was lonely, her comfort after the loss of her husband. Now, she realized that he had also been a protector all along, just waiting for the right moment to prove it. As she stood there with Max, Keanu reflected on how much Max had done for the neighborhood. He wasn't just a dog. He had a history of saving lives, protecting others, and working through dangerous situations. He had been trained to respond in ways most dogs could never imagine, and now, he was using those skills to protect the people he loved. Keanu knew that from now on, Max wasn't just her loyal dog, he was the guardian of Jardim das Flores. And she was grateful every day that Max was by her side. As the days passed, Max's new role as the guardian of Jardim das Flores was solidified. The neighborhood, once filled with uncertainty due to recent muggings, now felt safer. Max's presence had brought a sense of security to everyone. People began to go about their days without the constant worry that something might happen. Max had proven himself to be more than just a dog, he was a protector, and everyone in the neighborhood knew it. Keanu couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. She had adopted Max 3 years ago, not knowing his past or how much he would come to mean to her. He had been her loyal companion, always there for her after the loss of her husband. But now, Keanu realized Max was much more than just a friend. He was a true hero, and he had saved her just as much as he had saved the entire neighborhood. Each time Keanu walked Max through the neighborhood, she noticed the way people greeted them. Children ran up to pet him, and adults smiled, thankful for Max's watchful eyes. Max never let his guard down, always scanning the surroundings, alert and ready to protect. Keanu realized how lucky she was to have him by her side. She thought back to that night when Max had defended her so fiercely against the robbers. She hadn't known at the time that Max's past had prepared him for that very moment. His training, his courage, and his loyalty had saved her life, and the lives of others in the neighborhood. He had gone from a dog in need of a home to a hero who protected everyone around him. Keanu often reflected on how adopting Max had been one of the best decisions of her life. He had given her more than just love and companionship, he had given her a sense of security and safety that she hadn't realized she needed. Max had become more than a dog, he had become her protector and her family. Now, as the guardian of Jardín das Flores, Max's legacy continued to grow. Keanu knew that with him by her side, the neighborhood would always be safe. Max had found a new purpose, and so had she. Together, they made the world a better place, one day at a time.